Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name is Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Anyone who knows me knows that I have been dying to talk about Ultraman on the podcast since I started it last year. I'm a huge fan of it, and I can barely get anybody to listen to me about it. So thank you very much for bearing with me on this episode. That's not the way to start. But I'm very excited to be joined this week by somebody who knows a lot about Ultraman. He is a seven-time Annie nominee, Emmy award-winning artist. You know him for his work on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Kubo and the Two Strings, Lost Ollie, and On Ice. And on June 14th, you can see the film on Netflix, which he wrote and directed. It is a labor of love for him, Ultraman Rising. Welcome, Shannon Tyndall. Hello, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kyle. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being
I'm
on.
excited to talk about Ultraman too. I'm glad to. Is this your inaugural Ultraman conversation?
Yeah, it is on the podcast. I've made videos for us, and I've written quite a bit about it for the site. But I'm just like, yeah, this is the Ultraman. This is the first Ultraman podcast, and
Hey,
hopefully beginning of yeah. Um, so I remember watching some Ultraman when I was a kid. There was some on. I grew up in Colorado. There were some, I think dubbed Ultra 7 was on at some point and things like
yeah,
that. Um, but the one that I really remember actually was the English language one, the Australian one they made, Toward the Future, which was I think in the early
yeah.
'90s.
Mhm.
And then during the early part of the pandemic, once there's a big long history, if anybody is interested in that, where Super I Productions lost the rights or had rights issues with
Yeah,
elsewhere in the on Earth other than Japan, basically.
yeah.
Um, but then that got settled, and they have been really pushing all the old seasons, and so that's really where I started watching everything. But where
Yeah.
did it start for you?
It started for me with the original Shin Hayata series. That's I watched it. It was in syndication. I think on WDRB channel 41 in Kentucky. I grew up in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, and I got my Kentucky Wildcats Rupp-Arena floor ring on
Oh,
right
well
here.
done.
Uh, the old floor from Rupp Arena, but um, I was exposed to it then. The two shows that I watched then was Battle of the Planets, which is Gotcha Man. Those were my two. That was my intro to Japanese pop culture, and all that came at the same time. It's when I was introduced to the Shaw Brother films
Right.
on Kung Fu Theater and Golden Harvest and all this stuff. So all that stuff kind of came to me at once when I was around 4, 5, 6 ish, and it just like you can't not be grabbed by that image of a red and silver superhero fighting giant monsters. It's because it was so different than anything in American comics. And I grew up, in my earliest memories of looking at comics is looking at one of Walt Simonson's early Thors before he had developed that Walt Simonson style. But so I'm a nerd from very far back.
Bona
But
fides, check
uh,
out.
yeah, yeah. So, but then I there wasn't a whole lot to grab onto then. It wasn't
Mm,
big here in the way it was in Japan. Like if you're a kid in Japan, you could buy t-shirts and tennis shoes and toys and records and anything you wanted. But here there wasn't anything available. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles and it kind of rekindled my love because I was surrounded by it again. Because you could go to Little Tokyo and
right.
go to the shops and you could pick up first like the Metacom figures of Ultraman because they did all the Ultra characters, and then I could get books on it. Even if I couldn't understand the Japanese in those books, I got behind the scenes pictures and I had all those things, and then I got the DVDs for Ultraman Tiga.
Mm,
And yeah, I was as excited as anybody else when they got the whole rights issue cleared up because it meant I could finally get really great copies of the original series. I did see a little bit of Ultra 7 on TBS when I
yeah.
was around 12 or 13, and those were the dubbed episodes that I think you mentioned before. And Ultra 7 is probably my favorite of the Ultra
Yeah, mine
series
too.
because it blends the darkness of Ultra Q and the outer
Hmm.
limits vibe of that in with it, which I think is there's nothing really that feels like Ultra 7. It's really cool,
Yeah.
which I would love to get a little bit, if I get to do another film, to get a little bit more of that vibe into the film. But, yeah, so that's where it started, and the obsession with it kind of blossomed into an idea inspired by it.
Yeah, like, so yeah, right around that same time, I like, obviously there was the huge Power Rangers push too. So like there were we grew up in a time when and before as well, but like the westernization of Japanese media was like really, it was huge, and we could watch
Yeah,
these like, Gotcha Man, like you said, and um Space Battleship Yamato, which was
yeah.
what was it called over here? I forget what it was called. Um Maybe it was just called that. I don't
Was
remember.
it Star Blazers?
That's right, Star Blazers, thank you.
Yeah,
Um, but you get to watch all that stuff on, like, Toonami, and then, like,
yeah,
Power Rangers was the biggest thing in the world, and, like, even at the time, I was just like, "Well, this is clearly a Japanese show that has been, like, with these
yeah,
American actors in there." Um, and so it was, like, an enjoyable kind of trip down memory lane, I guess, like, once I was started picking up the new Ultraman, or the new Blu-rays of Ultraman, because they look amazing, but also, like, it scratches the Godzilla itch too. Like, it feels like it's got both of the
yeah,
things. It's, I and there is just something about like watching guys in suits, which we know that they are,
yeah,
fighting on, you know, scale models that look tremendous. They spend so much time on those
yeah.
models. It's like it scratches two things for me, which is the Doctor Who fandom, which I am as well, and then also like Jerry Anderson Thunderbird stuff because I love like little tiny models and puppets and whatnot.
We gotta talk about offline about me and Doctor Who at some point, and there was
Okay.
an opportunity that I had at one point, and it always feels like the one that got away,
Oh no.
yeah, because I watched my Saturdays, in the evening was on PBS, Red Dwarf, then Tom Baker Doctor Who.
Yeah.
That was the Doctor. So, that's what I would watch. But, yeah, there is like, you see the vehicles, and, like, there's the Godzilla of it all too. I
Yeah.
would always wonder as a kid, like, why isn't Ultraman fighting Godzilla? Like, because I don't know the differences between, Toho and Tsuburaya and those things. I'm like, "What?" But actually he did, because famously one of the kaiju was just because Eiji Tsuburaya helped create Godzilla, they literally just use, one of the suits, the Godzilla, it's very clearly just Godzilla with a
Yeah.
frill.
It's very funny,
So,
but yeah, it's great.
but I remember seeing that one as clips. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's Godzilla." And then but yeah, I think there was we had miniatures work, here, but not in that way.
Right.
But it was important to me, like, even on the design of our Ultraman in this film, I had to have the fin, to as a little ode to the zipper in the back of the suit. Because it's one of those things that became like, how do we hide the zipper? We don't. We
Yeah.
just put more fabric over top of it, but then it became an iconic element of the suit that you just have to have. So,
And maybe like one of the best things about, that kind of, tokusatsu Japanese superhero stuff is the kind of transforming aspect of it, which
yeah,
which I think American doesn't. It's sort of just like they put on a costume and then they are that superhero. It's not like there is a power that gets released, and especially with Ultraman, they go from human-sized humans to these giants.
yeah.
Um, and there really is something about like unleashing an alien power, which I think like really, for some reason, like really connects to the kid part in me, because it seems like that's what we all kind of wanted, or at least I wanted growing up, was like,
Well, you had it in Gotcha Man too, where they said
yeah, yeah,
at least the translation was transmute, and they become these, bird inspired heroes. Like I remember I'd be on the swing set in my buddy Scott Walker's backyard, and I'd swing and I'd leap off with a blanket around my neck, and I'd say transmute into my Mickey Mouse watch, and oh, uh, I'm Mark from Battle of the Planets. So, but there is, like, if you look at, it was a huge thing with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which
right,
happened to become that, like, you can look back to the Marvel comics and look at Ant-Man and characters like that that had elements of it. And I actually wonder if they were inspired by that. I'd have to look back at when Ant-Man was created as part of the Avengers, because 63 is when Marvel became the Marvel we know. But
right.
um, but it is one of those things, but, like, that you're actually fighting giant monsters too. There's like, when you watch that show, they don't that's not there's kind of the origin story of how Shin Hayata merged with the alien Ultraman, but the science team is already there. You already established a history that kaiju have been attacking the world, uh, and so you feel like you've been dropped into the middle of the story, which I love. I don't It's why that, like, the film we made is not an origin story. It kind of is, but I didn't wanna tell that. I wanted you to feel like you were dropping into a world where Ultraman and the kaiju already existed, because it was one of the things that I loved about the original series. It just was.
Mhm.
And I think history and legacy are those things that, in great storytelling, like when I watch Star Wars, Mark Haynes, who I've worked with forever, he and I would talk about, like, there's one of our favorite lines in Star Wars is, um, when Obi-Wan is talking to Luke and he says, "Back when I fought in the Clone Wars with your father." The Clone Wars, what is that? In one sentence,
Yeah.
he's established all of this history. And then Luke's conversations with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, like, there's history to that world, and it feels like there's history in it. And that's one of the things when you step into something like Ultraman, like, there you can be intimidated by it, but you can I was quite excited by it, because I was like, how do you incorporate all this incredible mythology? This idea of a science team that's meant to kind of protect against these monsters and these aliens, that's been an organization for a while, and the suggestion that it's all over the world is pretty incredible. Um, but and see the different components of the team and how they work together. And then through the different series, how each Ultraman is introduced. I love how Dan Moriboshi's introduced in Ultra Seven, where he's just kind of this dude just shows up in front of the man, what's the name of the car?
Oh gosh. It's the
The
best
point,
car
the
by
point,
far.
the
Yeah, the
pointer.
pointer. Yeah.
So the pointer, and like, and they're driving along, and you see that really cool triangular force field, which we pay homage to actually in this movie. But he's just standing there, ha 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 ha, and he's standing on top of the car, and it's the weirdest intro for a character, but really cool and memorable. Like, he's just got this, and then you eventually find out, oh, he's the alien Ultra Seven in the
Yeah.
form of a human named Dan Morboshi. So
It's so interesting, like, because I obviously knew what Ultraman was from growing up and stuff like that, and but, like, the reason I started picking them up really was because, I read a really good review of the Blu-ray of Ultra Q, and
yeah,
I'm a huge Outer Limits fan as well, and I was just like, "Well, this sounds really up my alley," and
yeah.
it is, like you were saying earlier, like, it is such an interesting and kinda creepy and dark and yet kind of funny in a lot of ways show, and then the fact that concept just goes, well, what if there was a good guy version of, like, to fight these monsters that are there every week? And it seems like such an easy idea, and yet it has spawned this, 55, if almost 60-year, franchise, which is, they ed- everything can fit onto it. I think it's one of the most malleable superhero ideas, because there's been every season, as is common with with a lot of Japanese media, is a different group of people and different, circumstance, but the ultra of it all is kind of uh incredibly iconic. Like,
I mean, they do the same thing in Common Rider, where they
yeah,
swap people out. They have kind of, um,
themes.
similar characters and themes with it. But one of an insane moment that I almost uh, broke down in tears was last year. I got to go to Tsubucon. It was the second time I'd been, and I mean, there were a lot of incredible things that happened that weekend. But when we were meeting Yuki Yamada for the first time, who plays our Ken, who is actually one of the stars of Godzilla Minus One. We're meeting him, and he's the sweetest, and I cannot wait for people to hear his performance in the film. I just watched it last weekend.
Hmm.
The Japanese language cast is incredible. But then just behind him, even with the mask, I see these eyes that are familiar, and it was Hiroko Sakurai, who plays Akiko Fuji in the original series.
Oh my gosh.
And I legit, like, started to tear up, because she came up to us and she could not have been sweeter. And then a few hours later, we're in the hotel lobby and we're hanging out, and she's coming and we're chatting with her, and she wanted to get a picture, take a picture, and then she has to go, and we say our goodbyes. And about 15 minutes later, one of the folks from Tsubraya comes up to us, to John Aushma, our co-director, and I, and he says, Sakurai-san was worried that you were so busy that you hadn't eaten, and so she bought you guys katsu sandos, and they were Ultraman themed katsu and she wanted you to have this. And again, I was like, oh my god, this is like my grandmother, my mom, like making
Yeah.
sure I'm taken care of. But like that's that was, it's like just to be a fan, like grow up and I'm like literally seeing Akiko in front of me, and then she'd mind me a katsu sando. Like it's like life doesn't get much better than that.
I mean, for those of you listening who are not steeped into the Ultraman, like she is a legitimate legend when it comes to this franchise. Like, not only was she in
She's
Ultra
in
Q,
Ultra Q
yeah,
and Ultraman, so
and then she went on to be like a Subaraya executive as well. Like, so she's
yeah,
like fully steeped in all of
yeah.
this stuff, and she shows up in a lot of she cameos in a lot of the films and things like that, and she's just, yeah, she, I think that is maybe the best, like, short of meeting, I mean, really anybody from that first season would be
Well,
amazing, but
there's, the first Supercon we went to, they had a big, dinner, and they had they distinguish between the different there's 1st gen, 2nd gen, 3rd gen. And 1st gen, all the casts or the stars from Ultraman, Ultra 7, Return of Ultraman, Ultraman Ace, they were all on stage together. And at the end of that, all of the Ultraman ever suited came into the crowd, and I was
oh
losing my mind. And they do this thing in Japan, if you ever go to any kind of convention there, that would never fly here just because people would not, I just think like they wouldn't be respectful in the same way, where when you come out of a lecture like we did, there was an Ultraman Tiga workshop, not like a workshop, like a presentation at Tsubukon that first year. And when you come out, all the stars are waiting and you get to shake their hands, and nobody's asking for autographs, nobody's asking for selfies. It's just like, hey, if you'd like to shake their hand, and you're like, this is lovely, man, we should, I wish we could do this kind of thing everywhere, because to be able to
yeah.
meet them and say hello and say thank you, and it's not a moment that you post about. It's not a moment like, but it's just a moment of connection between people that inspired you when you're growing up.
Yeah. Oh man, that sounds so awesome. And now you're part of that. Like, I mean, that's, and the fact that they are so welcoming to you, like, because there's a world where, uh, I don't know, you have talked about before that like Subaraya, as a company were very, very welcoming, but
Oh,
like
incredible! Yeah.
fandom and also people involved in it there's a world where they can be very sniffy about, oh, these Americans want to come in and do
It,
stuff, but
well,
they are not that way.
it's fans. Period.
Yeah,
I
I guess that's
there
true.
there was an image released of a statue of our character from Comic Con in Osaka this weekend, and there were lots of opinions
Sure.
about the design there. I'm pretty impervious to that.
Right.
I'm like, hey, look, it might not be the Ultraman that you grew up with, but I hope you'll watch the movie and you'll engage with the character on an emotional level. That's ultimately all I care about. But I love Ultraman just as much as you. He's not your Ultraman and not my Ultraman. So you always have to prepare for that. Another huge Ultraman fan, Guillermo del Toro, is a huge Ultraman fan, and
Yeah.
Guillermo has actually been involved in the film and very supportive and watching screenings and weighing in. I haven't really talked about it just because it's like, um, but he's a massive fan, and he's constantly reminding me of like always engage in a positive way. Don't get into it with folks. People are coming to it from a different angle, and he's been an incredible guiding force in that way. To like, look, there are going to be some people who hate this movie, and there are going to be other people who hate this Ultraman, but did you get to tell the story that you wanted to? And the answer is yes. And do I feel it honors the legacy of Ultraman? Yes. Does Tsubraya feel it honors the legacy of Ultraman? 100%. One of my favorite moments so far, we screened the film. We had a wrap party and screening at the Egyptian a couple weeks ago. And Sukagoshi-san, who's the chairman and CEO, and Minamitani-san, who is the head of global, and then Onda-san, who is kind of he's kind of the police. He's the Ultraman fan. To see Onda-san walk out of the theater and look like a giddy 8-year-old, and then
Mhm.
just telling me how excited he was, because it was the first time he'd seen the film all together and finished. That to me is what I look for. But what I also look for is I want the kid who never knew anything about Ultraman. I want that kid to come out and be like, this is their Ultraman. Like
Mhm.
that's one of the things I had to understand about you look at the prequel films, the Star Wars prequel
Right.
films. And I was like caught up in that hype. I was at Cal Arts at the time, and I was there to see the second screening. We're waiting out on Hollywood Boulevard to get into the Chinese and watch it. And you're sitting on our inflatable Darth Maul chairs and doing the whole thing. And it was fun. It was a blast. And then, people start to get negative. And then I started to learn that, what I thought was really cool was there are people who grew up, those are their Star Wars films. And
Oh, yeah.
you gotta respect that. And I saw a lovely post, I think from ILM, thanking Ahmed Best for what he had contributed to the legacy, because that poor guy,
Yeah.
he was there to do a job and was so excited to be a part of the legacy. And what fans did, that guy, he did not deserve it. And it was awesome to see somebody shouting that guy out, because he is a part of the legacy of that story. And it comes with the territory, especially when you have a character that has so much legacy. There was a moment we were going to call the film Ultraman Legacy, and then James Gunn, who's also James is a huge Ultraman fan as well.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they were calling it Superman Legacy, and I was like, oh man, that was like I love that title. And then he decided we're just going to call it Superman a few weeks ago. I want I was like, James, man, why didn't you just like decide that
We already
earlier?
have a logo. Like, you should have said something
We
early. Yeah.
Uh, but uh, but no, it is. Like, what's crazy is I never felt. I just want to tell a good story. I
Sure.
was never thinking about, oh my gosh, your fans going to hate this. I know from having made things in the past that people are going to come at you, and that's fine if they want to do it. If that's how they want to express it, that's okay. I am constantly just like, if I want to support something, I do it publicly. If I have an issue or criticism of something, I usually try and keep it to myself, because I know what it takes to make things. I know how
Right.
hard it is. And I know whatever power people think a director has is not the power that they actually have. Like we all answer to the larger studio. And so people have said it before, nobody sets out to make a bad thing. People always they want to make a good thing. But yeah, but that's like you can even if you look back at Ultraman, look at the Ultraman series. At the time that show came out, it had a huge budget. It was considered groundbreaking for its effects, and people look at it now like, oh, that's kind of cheesy. That's kind of in the same way that like audiences fainted when they watched Dracula for the first time in the theater, you
Yeah.
know. And but there is there is something that's just charming about Ultraman to me.
Yeah.
I can't describe it any other way than that.
No, it's totally true, and and that's something that they've really maintained over the years. Like I have a particular love of the show era, just show
Yeah.
media in general. I just think it's more fun in a lot of ways, and it kind of just it does make me feel like a kid. But like, you look at something like the 90s Godzilla movies, and especially like the 90s Gamera movies are really
Oh,
dark, but they are
and really
amazing,
good. Yeah,
really
really good.
good.
Yeah,
Um,
those Gamera movies, man.
Yeah, I just recently showed, some friends, the first one of those, and I was just, like, so excited, and I know that's people were like, "Now who's Gamera?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Just what, you
Yeah,
don't need to know who
just
Gamera is."
just come join me in the fun.
Yeah. Um, what are so you mentioned, you were really excited about Tiga, and, now that they're all out there, if you've watched probably most of them, other than Ultra 7, what are some of your favorite of the seasons?
Ultra Q. I
Yeah.
mean, you gotta talk about Ultra Q. It's just so while it's inspired by Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, it it's got its own spin, and there's a difference to it. I would love to do like a cool live action version of Ultra Q. I think it's right for it. I think it'd be really
Mhm.
awesome. And you can lean a little bit more into the international with it, so you have the team, represent more broadly. I think that would be really cool, and like really go dark with it. Like
Oh yeah.
I'd go R with it. I think because I think that would be really cool to do. But probably, I mean, there's my favorite episode ever is Brother from Another Planet, because I like the whole switcheroo that somebody is impersonating Ultraman, and I think Nisei Ultraman is probably actually my favorite Ultraman design outside of Ultraman B type. But
Mhm.
Nisei Ultraman is just looks cool. And I love how they played that in Shin Ultraman. Like Shin Ultraman was so rad because like you watch that movie and they're condensing all like Ano-san is like condensing all of his favorite Ultra episodes into a movie.
Yeah.
And man, I had a blast watching that thing. We saw actually um Madeline Doro, who's on our production team, she does voiceover for dubs, and her voice, she's one of the crowds in that. So
Oh,
we have a
cool.
little bit of the Ultraman Rising team in Shin Ultraman. But yeah, that was pretty rad. But like that Brother from Another Planet episode, I remember really hitting me as a kid because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I always cringe whenever somebody I love is going to be framed. I would
Wha
get so oh, I got to turn the channel.
Yeah.
And when it happens in Ultraman, you're like, oh no, how's he going to get out of this? And so, but yeah, it's OG series, Ultra 7, Tiga, and Q are
Yeah.
the kind of go. I know some people are haters on it, but I love the fun of Taro. I think Taro is like really fun. Um,
Taro has, like, some of the best, model work of that
it
they ever
also
did.
has some of the best cinematography in it too. It's
Yeah.
shot beautifully. It's really cool
Yeah.
in that way. So
And you just kinda have to, like, you know, there's room for both, and I think that's the main thing, like, I always try to tell people who are like, for example, when She-Hulk came out, people were, like, really against that. I'm just like, "It's just different flavors, man." Like, they
it's
can't all
different
be the
flavors.
same.
If you don't like it, don't watch it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine. I think unfortunately there's been this, people are always looking for community, and unfortunately
Mm.
sometimes that manifests as in a negative way of people like collectively hating something and find, oh, you hate that too. I just never. I used to be like when I'd come out of a movie, I'd be picking it apart. I've been out of that for so long because I just don't. I just don't want to put my energy toward that. I want it to be. Here are the things I really dug about it, and I think too having, um, you know, I share a lot of the stuff I do with close friends of mine, and we give each other very honest assessments of those things. Like anything that I write or that I make, um, Jorge Gutierrez sees it, Peter Ramsey sees it, um, Chris Nee sees it. Those are folks I really trust, and they're gonna be direct with me, and they're gonna be honest with me if they don't like something, but they're doing it in a respectful way. And whenever I'm asked to, I just watched a screening of a new film at Netflix yesterday. I don't think I can talk about it, but it was a
Mm.
pretty exciting first screening by Trisha Gum. And when I, it's like when people ask for feedback, I'm like, well, what were you intending? Because I don't want to impose like I don't want to see me make that movie. I want to see you make that movie. So what was your intent, and how can I support that? That's what I want to try and do. And I think having gone through that a bunch of times and having been on the other side of it, when you're getting some pretty heavy criticism, it just you kind of it's just not like why is that fun? Like okay, it wasn't for me. It's fine. Let's
Yeah.
move on. And it doesn't mean that I don't feel passionately about something. And there's a whole thread right now on Twitter. I don't know if you followed it. Like Scott Derrickson was pointing out
Mm.
Pauline Kael in reviews of Blade Runner at the time, and people just ran with it and started going at Scott. Scott, I think, is an incredible storyteller, and like they weren't sticking around to listen to his whole thought completed.
Right.
That actually the criticism of that film is what I think it was less caused Ridley to re-examine it, more of like he can because of its later success, he was allowed to re-examine it because the studio was like, "Oh, this is a cult classic. We're going
Mm.
to give you the money to release a director's cut." But I think it's great. But there was the comment that somehow criticism has gone soft. I think that's ridiculous. It's not gone soft at all. In fact, you have a lot of critics who have very little experience, or their fans, or just the public coming at you. There's way more negativity now than I think there ever was, just because it's been opened up to so many. And while you know that that's going to be part of it, it doesn't make it easy. But I like, one of my favorite reviewers is Walter Chaw. Walter pulls zero punches. Like, if
Right.
he doesn't, but he writes about it in like, the dude has really watched your movie, whether he liked it or not. He's really watched your movie, and he's thought a lot about it, and he spent time on it, which is a sign of respect, I think, to the process of it, whether he likes it or not. And if he really loves it, he's going to give you all the reasons why. It's not going to just be why. Oh man, I love this, and just be in, like, end with it. I loved his review of Elemental. Elemental was directed by a good friend of mine, Pete Sohn. Pete went through this, like, he got a standing ovation at Cannes, and then the next thing was, like, the film was announced as being the lowest release ever at Pixar. And that was really, I was talking to Pete during that whole time, and it was coming off of me having done Lost Ollie, and there, like, it was a smaller show, so it didn't get kind of the promotion that I'd hoped it would get, and it didn't catch on. So I'd been a bit through that. But then you see how it was promoted, and it rose, and you saw it. But Walter there, it was really awesome to see Walter's review of it. Walter actually reached out to me to talk about it and say, "Hey, can I connect with Pete? Can you connect me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure," because it moved him in such a way, because it reflected experiences he'd had with his parents when he was a kid. So those are the things that, no matter what you make, there are going to be people that hate it, but there are going to be people who really, really connect with it. And maybe after time, Joe versus the Volcano is one of those movies for me. I loved it from the first day I saw it.
Sure.
A lot of people just thought it was Weirdsville. They didn't get it. And I'm like, man, like, it's like this beautiful love story, and a guy who learns to love himself, and then he can love other people. I think it's an incredible movie. Sorry for
Yeah.
going off an extreme tangent there, but
No, I mean, I, I have written, part of my job is to write reviews of
yeah,
movies, and I have really bucked the trend, or I've tried to anyway, of just like, I didn't like it, so let me just crap all over it. Like, that's
yeah,
not helpful to anyone, even the people who are trying to decide whether they want to go see it, which is ultimately who your audience is for reviews. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, I feel like we as critics owe it to the filmmakers and the film to, like, actually think about it and,
yeah,
put it out there. And that's like, I my least favorite type of movie to review is one where I have no opinion, because it's just like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's fine. Like, it's tough.
Indifferent is the worst. I think I just posted this last week on, I will forever call it Twitter. I'm not calling it X, sorry.
Yeah,
Uh,
right
is
there
I
with you.
posted last week, it was like, I would much rather someone hate what I've made than forget it the moment they walk out of the theater.
Absolutely.
That's way worse. Meh, that's the worst, man. But if you hate it, like, hey, at least I made you feel something about it. Even if, I mean, there are movies that I've come out of initially like not liking it, and then it grew on me, and I discovered, like, oh, the reason I didn't like it is because it made me uncomfortable about something,
Right.
and it was challenging me in a way, and I needed to think about that, and process it a little bit. And then I like being challenged when I'm in the theater. I do not like to be spoon fed things. I love experiencing new things. One of when you talk about films being about, like, transporting you to a different place, it doesn't need to be a fantasy. One of my favorite films of the last 20 years is Moonlight. And that's a
Mm,
film where I didn't experience what those characters have. Um, but man, was it incredible to walk in their shoes for, an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's why it's like, talking about criticism, I'm going to be, um, the first one in line, after having seen Moonlight, after having seen If Beale Street Could Talk. I'm going to be the first. And now this is where my memory fails me on the director's name. Why am I doing this? Why didn't
oh,
I?
Barry Jenkins.
Yeah, Barry Jenkins. Underground Railroad. The trailer for Lion King came out, and people were going at it. I said, look, that dude has earned, like, I'm going to go see that movie because Barry has a specific voice, and I'm dying to see what he did with it. Like, I it doesn't cancel out the fact that I love the original Lion King, just like Jon Favreau's version didn't cancel it out.
Sure.
And anything that Barry does, I'm just gonna watch it because he's gonna bring something special to it. He's going to bring something special to it. There are a lot of there are a lot of filmmakers that I love whose films I don't always love, but there are things that I love in those films, and I will
Yeah.
see. Or there are films that I love just because the tone of it.
Mm.
Tenet is one of those films. I know it's a very polarizing movie, but man, it made me feel a way that
Yeah.
I haven't felt in another movie, and even some of the criticism that's leveled at it, I don't disagree with it, but I still love the movie just because, I love that Nolan is challenging me and challenging a traditional narrative and doing it in, I believe, an elegant and an interesting way. That's why I want to go to the movies. I want to be surprised.
Yeah. And I think there's something too to be said for like allowing yourself to change, like your opinion to change on something the more you reflect on it. I think that's also
Yeah,
something that like comes with, as an example, I took a friend and I went to go see Inside Llewyn Davis, the Coen Brothers movie, when that came out
yeah,
whenever ago. And the first time watching it, it's such a dark and upsetting like story. And
yeah.
I came away going, I didn't really like that. And then months later, and my friend agreed with me. And then months later, it was like 1 or 2 on my top 10 of the year. And she was like, I thought you didn't like that movie. And I was like, I didn't at first, but I had to think about it. But it's like
Well,
that's the kind of thing that can happen when you actually like engage with
it
media, which is like the point, I think.
well, and it's a perfect example of a film. It's so funny you brought it up because people have asked with Ken in our film, like he's kind of abrasive. He's kind of like, yeah.
Right.
So is Lewin Davis. And Lewin Davis like never changes.
Mm-mm.
But man, am I hypnotized in watching that guy's journey and oh my gosh, that like if he just get out of his own way, he
Yeah.
would have the respect that he's looking for, and he just can't get out of his own way. And I love those kinds of stories, man. Like another film that really just blew me away recently is a ghost story. I like another director um, that I will watch no matter what. And here, like my brain, I apologize,
David Lowery.
David Green Knight.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm always going to show up. Ask me directors' names in the second half of the day. Many apologies to Barry and David because I respect you both immensely. So I apologize. My brain's not functioning. I've been doing
That
hours
is
of it.
a-okay. I had time to sit here and think about who you were
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah.
so I could say
So,
it.
but
We're
a
helping
ghost
each other
story
out.
like that film, man, that film of like what it feels like to be left behind.
Right.
How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile like incredible forced loneliness? What that feels like. Those are the voices I'm excited to see and hear. It's like, look, I love me a big tent pole. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. Like Denis Villeneuve is one of those guys who is throughout his career, whether you're watching Polytechnique or L'Incendies and all of those films building up to, oh, he's going to step in a genre with Arrival. Oh, wow, that's incredible. Then he's doing Blade Runner 2049. Oh my gosh, that's incredible too. He's going to do Dune? What? Like that's to me that's actually taking like an independent film philosophy
Mm.
and fooling studios into thinking you're
Yeah.
making big tempo. And I'll tell you what, Dune 2, Dune Part 2 is not a traditionally it's not a traditional narrative.
No.
It's very strange in the best way, surprising in the best way, and it was rewarded by the success. So it's like, hey guys, look, people are open to seeing new and fresh points of views on things. Just let it happen. Like you
Yeah.
give it a shot. If it's done well and the story's well told, then and you promote it, people know it's there, then they'll watch it.
Yeah. Well, and the same like what you were saying about Barry Jenkins directing the Mufasa movie, like they're gonna do it anyway. That's the thing about franchise movie making. Like these
Yeah,
are going to happen whether you think they ought to or not. So it's like if there's a filmmaker attached that you really enjoy, it's like go support them because they're making a movie that they're gonna make. You know, like Ryan Coogler made Black Panther. It's like
Yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh, really? You're gonna go make Black Panther?" Well, it's like
yeah,
he also made Creed, which was a franchise
yeah,
movie. So
yeah,
like
yeah,
people
exactly,
forget
and,
that
like,
stuff.
like, but also because he was so successful, he now gets to do his new original film.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
so, like, they like, one can breed the other. It was
Yeah.
funny, I was playing that game with some friends, like, "Look, everybody's, like, slamming these live action remakes of Disney classics, but, like, if you were given one, what would you do with it, and which one would you do it?" And, like, somebody threw Bambi at me. I was like, "You're insane. You're insane. Like, why would you do that?" And then I couldn't stop thinking about what I would do with Bambi. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh," like, "Hmm, well, if you read Sultan's original book, that is a lot more about Bambi and his mother rather than Flower and Thumper." And if you watch the interviews with Walt and with David Hand, that was a conscious. Well, not watch. If you There's the commentary track on Bambi where they've recorded the notes that were taken in those
Mm,
story sections, and they intentionally said, let's bring these other sidekick characters in. And it's beautiful and it's lovely. And Tyrus Wong, man, you can't defeat that. But you could focus on that mother story a little bit more. You could tell, like, and that was one where people were like, "You're insane." I'm like, as you said, if people were going to do it anyway, and I think Disney is going to do it anyway,
mhm.
but I think you could do it in a fresh way. To me, it's like, what they say is, you either do it different or better,
Right.
or you don't do it. But I think there is something, and obviously audiences are interested in it because they came out in droves to see Lion King,
Mhm.
came out in droves to see Aladdin. But if you can find a beautiful way, like, to me, WandaVision is a perfect example.
Yeah.
The show is weird in a really great way, and they allowed them to take that big swing, and it was a success. It's now kind of infected all the other Marvel films. So, but they were able to do it because there was that brand and character recognition with the Vision and Scarlet Witch. So I think there are those opportunities. And, what the public, at least the public who's complaining about it, what I always say is, like, if you want to see more original films, support them when they come out, because you don't.
Right.
Like, you can like to talk that you're going to support them. Oh, I need to see that eventually, but you didn't pay for a ticket to go see it in the theater. So if you're not willing to go pay and see it in the theater, then you can't really complain when studios don't want to make them, because they're entirely driven by money. Entirely
Yeah.
driven by money. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, speaking of franchise things, I do want to show you. Is- these just arrived. These are action figure versions of your
What?
characters. Uh,
How do you have these and I don't have them?
well, talk
Oh
to Bandai.
my oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
So
unbelievable. I
yes,
just
and
That is incredible. I just got Where is it? I have my giant flying Shin Ultraman that I just got yesterday.
oh,
I
nice.
have I have the mannequin broke, but I have a full size Ultraman suit on a mannequin, and with the color timer that works and the eyes light up.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's extreme. But that is incredible. Can
Y-
you hold that up again so I can
yeah,
see
of
it?
course. Yeah.
Because
So
I'd
I was
seen
gonna say,
photos, but, like, oh my gosh, the packaging. Oh
yeah,
my, I
it's
need
really
to look
great.
it
There's
up.
a little like trading card in there. These are the Bandai Ultraman Rising Bandai Namco 6-inch figures. They're
It,
really very nice. And
I
so
like They didn't do action figures, but I designed Kubo, and they did there's a statue of him. But then again, to see the full action figure of characters that I created and designed,
well, yeah, I mean that's what I was gonna say. Like
is kind of amazing.
this is your kaiju design. Like the
Yeah,
Gigantron is not a Subaraya
yeah,
creation.
yeah,
This was a your creation, and now it
yeah,
has the Ultraman logo. It's a
yeah.
toy. People can play with it. Like I thought you had seen these before, but you had
I mean,
not. So
I'd seen the prototypes, but
uh
that's
huh,
like what you would see when you go into,
yeah.
Target or Walmart or wherever.
It's got a
So,
tail that you can put on. Yeah, they're really cool.
there's
I
there's some cool. I've seen I do know that I have seen some stuff that's coming
mm,
that other folks haven't seen, but that's pretty incredible. That's
Yeah.
really I just remember back to when I was a kid and they had the big Godzilla,
Mm.
they were 'cause they were part of the Shogun line, right? The
Oh,
Shogun
yes.
line. But they had that vampire bat that had, like, the blood that course and I desperately wanted that. I got I'm surprised that adult me hasn't spent a considerable amount of money acquiring that thing I never got.
I
But,
wonder I
that's
know they've
amazing.
repackaged some of those, so I don't know if they've made that one, but,
Yeah,
you can yeah,
I don't think so. It could be one that was just created for the toy line too,
yeah.
and the rights of somebody owns it and they don't have it. But, yeah, that you could press the back of Godzilla's head and that little, like, plastic flame
Yeah.
would come out. I love that stuff.
Me too. Yeah, just like as a nerd, like, you can't see the rest of my office, but I have a bunch of little Ultraman guys, and it's like, well, now I get to put your guy up next to all these other guys, and it's like, what is that? As a kid who grew up watching Ultraman, like your design is now official
It's
canon, essentially.
it's pretty incredible. I mean, like, those moments in my career have been, when I was working on Kubo and, uh, Kent Melton, who unfortunately passed away recently, who was just a dear, dear friend and a dear person. I had said to him when I was working on Coraline, because he was doing the sculpts on Coraline, and that was the first time he ever sculpted any of my designs. And I said, I want to work with you on my own film someday. So when I sold Kubo to Leica and I went out there to start developing it, and Kent was working on he was just wrapping up on Paranorman and he was working on Box Trolls. And then I remember pitching Kubo to him over lunch and he started tearing up and he said, I'm in. And to then have him sculpt those characters, and that's one of the things that's magical about stop motion is you can hold a character that you imagined in your hands. And so I've got the sister maquette that Kent gave me just off camera right now.
Mhm.
And going back to inspiration, because I couldn't get Gotcha Man figures when I was a kid, I basically designed them into a character. So that's why they actually had fully winged cloaks like Gotcha Man at one point that they were gonna. They ended up having it, but I'm looking at the initial version that just has the cloak. But but yeah, it's just to see those things dimensionalized and that you have a part of this rich history is pretty. I'm a lucky dude.
Um, yeah. I mean, the movie, I've seen it. I haven't even said this to you yet, but I really liked it. Um, did that
Thank
need
you.
to be said? Maybe. But, you know, it's definitely like you were saying, you'd like to get, some Ultra 7 influence if you get to make another one. Um, is there c
There is
this
some
like
Ultra 7 in this one.
yeah. Um,
His Ken's dad has the red glasses on,
mhm.
and there's more, but I'm not gonna say more.
No, no, no. Yeah, I mean, that'll be fun to do like a, a circles with arrows
Well,
and stuff like that.
this isn't even about this is less about Easter eggs in the film and more to do with what I'd like to do with I know what I wanna do with films 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, you're gonna but there are little things that I'm really excited for people to see. There's like, I'll give one away. There's the Mazda Cosmo from Return of Ultraman, and that's the car that Ken's dad drives. Just because
Yeah.
I think it's one of my it's a real car. And funny story, Jay Leno owns one, and Jamie Scott, one of our sound guys, was trying to get a hold of because he wanted the authentic sound of that motor. It sounds like a little moped. It's like a 3-cycle engine, right?
Mm.
And he couldn't. I was like, "Did you get a hold of Jay? Is he gonna let us do it?" He eventually found it. It wasn't via Jay, but it's just a cool car. So those are things, and there are bigger ideas too
Mm.
that are in the film. But even like the orange of the KDF uniforms to pay homage to the Triple SP. Um, the helmets are inspired by the Ultra Garrison helmets from Ultra 7 that we just see in the background. So, but yeah, there's going to be if I'm lucky enough to do films 2 and 3, there's um I there's always the question from Tubriah, what was the original KDF like? Because Ken's mom founded it. We don't say that in the movie, but she founded the KDF. And it was, their philosophy was we need to understand and protect these creatures, even
Mhm.
we protect the city against them. But there's a deeper story there that I want to tell with the origins of that team.
Yeah. Which I cannot wait. I hope you get to do that. Before I let you go, you mentioned Brother from Another Planet, which is a really great episode. But the other one I wanted to mention that I got not, I mean, it's not one to ones, but like the I think it's called like the Kaiju Graveyard or Monster Graveyard or something like that is one of like the greatest episodes because the show is essentially Ultraman beats the crap out of kaiju and kills them. And there's an episode where he has to go, there's a ghost kaiju
Yeah,
essentially. And it's like a very sad episode. And you go like, oh yeah, like these were real creatures and they had this whole thing. And like, and I love the fact that like, while not a direct, adaptation of that or anything like that, like you are very pro kaiju in this movie as opposed to like
yeah,
they are evil and should be
yeah.
destroyed.
That was always the idea. That wouldn't it be interesting if the thing that reunited you with your family was the thing that it can be and has been seen as your enemy.
Mm,
So, communication being instigated by something that is typically an antagonist. So yeah, it was, and there are those elements too. It's one of my favorite things to do is to sit down with Onda-san from Tsuburaya, and he'll start to get into the hidden meanings
mm,
inside those episodes and the controversy at the time with some of the episodes where there were some things that TBS, the network in Japan, didn't want to air, and they would threaten to Brian. He insisted on having those things, things too that might be a lot more apparent to a Japanese audience who knows the history. The other, like to hear Ano-san talk about Ultraman because he is maybe the biggest fan, and at Tsubicon last year he did a whole thing on Return of Ultraman. And that was just incredible because that dude can tell you the cinematographer on an episode. He can tell you the costume designer. He can tell you what the themes are. That's the thing that what I hope when people see the movie that we'll get a lot more proliferation because there's hundreds of books in Japan on the history of Ultraman. I want to see some of those books translated so that people
yeah.
can get into it. So I think if there's the engagement, the interest there, then we can learn like they have, those, guys like Ano and Higuchi-san and those folks have access to those things that I hope to have. I'll stumble through my horrible Japanese and try and read some of that stuff, but
Right.
or I'll,
Yeah.
or I'll just talk to Onda-san and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what that episode was actually about. Yep. So there's always been deep meaning in that show. It's one of the things I love. It's like, there are Miyazaki films that I love, and I've come to better understanding watching it and understanding it from the perspectives of people that Miyazaki's always been very clear. Like, I made this for this audience, or I made this
Right.
for this group. And so when you can talk to those folks and they can give you better, it causes better communication, and it's just fun to like get a new perspective on a movie.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, sir, for joining me on the show to talk about Ultraman and many other things. That was an excellent conversation. Thank you very much. I hope to get to talk to you again when your next one comes out, or just anytime you would like.
Yeah.
Would love to
Yeah.
have you
No,
on.
man. Thank you so much. This has been a blast. And I'm going to call up Bondi immediately after this
Yeah,
and be
do
like,
it. Yeah.
where are my toys, folks? So,
um, yeah, Ultraman Rising is on Netflix June 14th. Shannon Tyndall, thank you so much.
awesome.
I've been Kyle Anderson. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.